They say your neighbors are the people you can trust, but sometimes they're the ones you should fear the most. From secret obsessions to chilling night visits, these are 3 creepy neighbor horror stories you'll never forget. I moved into the building last fall. It was an old brick complex, peeling paint, creaking elevators, and that faint smell of dust that never quite left. My unit, 3C, was perfect for the price, but directly below me was 2B, and that's where he lived. From the first day, something felt off about my downstairs neighbor. He was in his late 40s, tall, always wearing the same faded black hoodie, even in warm weather. I'd pass him in the hallway, and he'd just stare. Not in a curious way, more like he was measuring me, figuring out how I worked. One night, a few weeks after I moved in, I was lying in bed scrolling my phone when I heard 3 slow knocks from beneath my floor. Not on my door, on the floor itself. I froze. Then after a few seconds, 3 knocks again. It happened twice more that night. The next morning, I ran into him by the mailboxes. He didn't say hello, just smiled faintly and said, "You walk around a lot at night, don't you?" I hadn't been walking. I hadn't moved at all. From then on, weird things started happening. I'd leave for work and come home to find my doormat slightly moved. Once I found my door unlocked when I was certain I'd locked it. My landlord swore no one else had a key. But the worst came one night in January. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of my front door creaking open. I sat up, heart racing, straining to hear. Soft footsteps crossed the living room. Then they stopped, just outside my bedroom door. I reached for my phone to call 911 and realized I'd left it charging in the kitchen. Whoever it was just stood there, not moving, not speaking. I could hear slow, steady breathing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated. The door closed, in silence. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, I demanded the landlord change my locks. He hesitated, then admitted something that made my skin crawl. Years ago, that same man in 2B had been caught entering another tenant's apartment while they slept. I never saw him again after that. 2 days later, there was police tape across his door. I never asked what happened. Some neighbors aren't just creepy, they're dangerous. And you never really know what they're capable of until it's too late. My wife and I bought our first house in a quiet suburban neighborhood last year. It was the kind of place where people waved when they passed by, lawns were neatly trimmed, and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. At least, that's what we thought. Our next-door neighbor was a man in his late 40s named Carl, always wore the same faded baseball cap and plaid shirt. Friendly enough, but something about him made my wife uneasy. She said he stared too long. One Saturday night, I woke up to the sound of our back gate creaking open. I figured it was the wind, until I heard footsteps on the grass. I peeked out through the blinds and saw Carl in our backyard, just standing there. His head tilted slightly like he was listening for something. I went outside to confront him, but he was gone before I reached the porch. No sound, no running, just gone. The next morning, I found footprints in the dirt beneath our bedroom window. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern. Every few nights, I'd hear that gate creak and see Carl in the yard, sometimes closer to the house, sometimes further away, always silent. Then one night, I decided to wait for him. I sat in the dark with the lights off, watching the yard. Around 2 a.m., the gate opened, and there he was. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Something tall and thin was standing behind him. Its limbs were too long, its head bent at an unnatural angle. Carl just stood there facing the house, while the thing behind him moved closer. I don't remember running to get my wife. I don't remember grabbing the phone. All I know is that when the police arrived, the backyard was empty. No Carl, no footprints, no sign anyone had been there. We moved out a month later. I moved into my first apartment last winter, a tiny one-bedroom in a crumbling old building that smelled faintly of mildew and cheap paint. The walls were so thin, I could hear my neighbor's TV as if it were in my own living room. It didn't bother me much. The woman across the hall, Mrs. Albright, seemed harmless enough. She was probably in her late 60s, with hair so white it almost glowed under the dim hallway light. She'd always greet me with this fixed, unblinking smile whenever we crossed paths. It was the smile that made me uneasy. Wide, stretched too far, and never quite reaching her eyes. On my second week there, I started hearing knocks late at night. Not on my door, but somewhere close. Always 3 slow, deliberate taps, followed by silence. Sometimes it happened at 1 a.m., sometimes at 3. Then one night, the knocks came again. 3 times. But this time, I swore they were right on my own door. When I checked the peephole, the hallway was empty, except for Mrs. Albright's door. It was cracked open just enough for her pale face to peek through. She wasn't looking at me, though. She was looking at the ceiling. The next morning, I noticed something strange. The door to her apartment was covered in tiny scratches near the handle, like someone had been trying to claw their way in or out. Over the next week, the noises got worse. Knocking turned into whispering. Whispers turned into shuffling footsteps that seemed to circle my door. I barely slept. One night, after another round of knocking, I snapped and yanked my door open. The hallway was empty, except for Mrs. Albright's door again, now wide open. I don't know why I stepped inside. Maybe I just needed answers. Her apartment was wrong. Every piece of furniture was shoved against the walls, leaving the center of the room bare except for a single wooden chair. On it sat a cassette player, still running, playing back the sound of knocks and whispers. And in the far corner, she stood, perfectly still, her eyes locked on me. That same stretched smile plastered across her face. I bolted back to my apartment and shoved a chair under the doorknob. The next morning, the unit across the hall was empty. No sign she'd ever lived there. The landlord swore there was never a tenant named Mrs. Albright. You never really know who's watching, so keep your doors locked and your mind open for the next story. Subscribe before it's too late. Thanks for watching.